A lot of times you'll see people interviewed and they're famous somehow. They have a Pulitzer Prize or they climbed a mountain. And then when we do that, we miss some fascinating stories. Stephen Jelinek is probably not going to be in the cover of some, magazine. He's not going to be on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He's just a person. But his life story is remarkable. It has involved sacrifice, heartache, murder, loss, dreams of remarkable scope, possibility, heartbreaking journeys, both physical and mental and literal and spiritual. And it's going to take us a while to get through these. But you know what? If you just sit with me in this time, you will come out the other end with a really profound look at the possibilities that await all of us. And that's why I like that story. A number of years ago, there was a commercial on television, The World's Most Interesting Man. Well, Stephen could be in the list for that because he is a fascinating man. If a story was a string, like a noodle and a thing of spaghetti, Stephen is a whole bowl of spaghetti, all the stories intertwine around each other. Let me read the bio real quick. Veteran, entrepreneur, designer, lifelong student of faith. He's traveled to 49 states, long distance hiking, outreach work, personal tragedy, depression, traveling nomad. I mean, it's a long, long list. And rather than keep you waiting, let's get right to this interview. As I said in my introduction, your story is like a plate of spaghetti. Every strand is a new different, and it's all intermingled together. And we're going to try to sort it out for our listeners and our viewers so they can understand just what your journey has been like. We always warm people up, though. Of course, you'll get a chance to ask me any question you want. One question only. You get to do that at the end. One question only, Stephen. But
Okay.
Before we get to that, you have your Jeopardy board. Give me your Jeopardy question. What's the topic for today?
Well, biblical banter for 1600.
Biblical banter for 1600. Which biblical character do you feel sorriest for?
Well, it'd have to be Job. There isn't any of them that I feel sorry for because all things work together for God in the end. So in the end, Job made out well.
It was a rough sled for a while.
It sure was a rough sled.
What did his wife say? Curse God and die was her suggestion somewhere in the middle of all that mayhem. Yeah.
And then poor Job, he's spending all this time, making sacrifices because his children are having a party at each other's houses every single night. And so he's feeling that burden. And so how much of his life did just making sacrifices for his wayward children? Well, then all of a sudden they get destroyed in a storm. And he's released from all that.
And then he gets another family.
He gets another family.
Yeah. How old was he when he died? Do you know?
I don't.
Yeah. I mean, to think about that, two complete sets of families. All right. Anyway, Job's your answer to the question.
Yes.
All right. Well, so, Stephen, here's what I'm going to do. You are the king of tangents. When I ask you a question, you'll say, and then you'll go on this side trip, and I'll never get back to the original question. So my job is to ask you a question, and you just like one single strand of spaghetti, just tell that story, and then I'll ask you another question about another person. Can you do this? Let's see what happens.
I don't know. I think,
Yes.
If I was born in another time, I'd be attention deficit and pumped full of Ritalin.
Let's do it. Talk about your grandfather.
Well, my grandfather was born in 1907, and he died in 2007. And I was the oldest of his 6 grandsons, so each one of us grabbed a handle on his casket. And he was amazing. He was a Christian zealot, right? Middle age, he comes to the Lord. He's running a profitable grocery store in St. James, Minnesota. And my mother was born, and her brother was, so I think they had 2 children at the time. He sells everything. It moves to Minneapolis because he wants to be more grounded in biblical study. And he goes to this little tiny Bible college called Northwestern Bible College back in the 40s, mid 40s. And Billy Graham is the president, young Billy Graham, who's 10 years younger than my grandfather.
Wow. How old was Billy Graham at the time?
Billy Graham would have been like in his early 20s. And that's where they launched the Billy Graham operation was originally was in Minneapolis.
He had a radio station, and your grandfather was asked to do a program on that radio station. Talk about that and the fruits that came of that.
Well, my grandfather, after he left Northwestern Bible College, he got a job with Hennepin County, which is the big county that Minneapolis is in, and as a probation officer for the juvenile courts. And so when Billy Graham asked my grandfather to do a daily devotional, you're in radio, you know what it's like. You got to find some talented people to fill some airtime. So he asked Billy, he says, well, Billy, can I ask the radio audience to pray about accepting these troubled youth, these foster children into their homes? And Billy said, yeah, go ahead. So he concluded every devotional to ask the audience to consider bringing these children. I don't know how many hundreds of children ended up getting placed into Christian families because of my grandfather's obedience to doing what God asked him to do. My grandfather never missed the opportunity. Now I'm going off, but my grandfather never missed.
Tell me about the fishing trip, because that's a good.
That's
story.
where I'm going. Okay,
good.
Yeah. So, anyways, my best day of my life as a child, Grandpa comes to my school, and he pulls my brother and I out of class, and says, I've come to get my grandsons. We're going fishing. So we go fishing, and I would suggest anybody to do that. Just take your, kids out of school one day, your grandkids, and have fun. But anyways, so we're on the road on our way to Leech Lake, Minnesota, and there's a hitchhiker. So my grandfather pulls over and brings this hitchhiker into the car, and he starts sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with the hitchhiker, and then we go up the road some more, and we need some gasoline. So back then, we didn't put gas in our cars. They had people doing that for us. But back then they had an attendant, and my grandfather sharing the good news of Jesus Christ with the attendant. And then he goes on, and we stop to get bait. Same thing. He's sharing the good news, and I tug on my grandpa's sleeve. I said, Grandpa, are we ever going to get to fishing? He says, Stephen, I have been fishing. And that's just the way he was. He always carried Bible tracts in his pocket, and he was always sharing with the waitress, and he would go to the gym and he'd sit in the hot tub. He says, yeah, that's the fishing pond.
Now, when you were a teenager, you'd like to go on bike trips. Talk about that time that you got the rousted by the cops. I guess I'll say that story.
Yeah. Well, I had a friend he grew up on the farm and had all these responsibilities early in life. And, and got his driver's license at 14, but he was driving way before then, the tractors and whatnot. But, anyways, my parents agreed to let me ride our bicycles up to our church camp, which is up on the Iron Range in Minnesota, 250 miles from home.
How old were you?
I was 15.
Okay.
So I ride my bike out to the farm and stay in the barn overnight. And then Mark and I get up in the morning and we start heading north. We ended up, we decided that we'd just bring a tarp with us, because weight is everything. And so we had a tarp and we'll just drape that over a picnic table. And then we'll weigh it down with our bicycles. And that's what we did. And we're sleeping in one of these typical, we've all seen them, these little town square parks, and under a picnic table. And then awakened by this bright light. Back then they had these 5D cell battery flashlights. They're like a club, right? And so then with that bright light in my eyes, I wake up and, it's law enforcement. Slow night or whatever. So they're there to check us out. And I go, and they go, well, do your parents know what you're doing? We told them, well, yeah, we're riding our bicycles up to Milwaukee, Minnesota. And they said, well, we need your phone numbers. Back then they just had two-way radios, so they had the radio to dispatch, who had the ability to call numbers. And so the dispatch lady calls our parents. I could hear her coming back on the radio. Yeah, their parents know about this. She says, I just don't know about some parents. And I think we were like at the end of being free range children. It's not that way anymore.
In fact, I have 4 daughters. They're 4 miles from the school. I thought they could ride their bikes, and it wasn't allowed. I mean, could I have done it? Yes. But everybody told me what a horrible idea that was. They'll be abducted. They'll be abducted. They'll be abducted. And the social pressure of that was such that I just couldn't do it. So what we have is we have a whole bunch of kids who don't get exercise because their parents are worried sick, something's going to happen to them. Well, I mean, I'm not saying there's not bad people in the world. Certainly there are. And you, of anybody, would know about what I'm talking about. But at the same time, it's kind of too bad, right? It is.
Yeah, it is, because, children don't, and children like myself, would have been given medicine, which would have cut off some of my creative thinking and reasoning, and so I'd be a different person if they diagnosed me with attention deficit.
Is that what you have?
I think I probably do. I was never diagnosed with it, but they didn't do that.
I went to the doctor. I thought I might have it. I probably do. And they gave me this worksheet that said, have you ever had homicidal thoughts or suicide? Well, no, I just think it's hard for me to keep attention. Anyway, he sent me the stuff and I thought, okay, maybe I forgot to fill it out. I got distracted. Anyway, that's another story. Talk about your military service.
Well, it's a daydreamer's paradise. I mean, I was assigned to the 90th MSS Missile Wing out of Cheyenne, Wyoming. And you have like hours of time.
So you're in a missile silo?
Yeah, I was part of the security forces.
Above ground or below
Above ground.
Okay.
We weren't allowed to go into like the launch capsule, because what good are we down there if we have something going
So,
on
and
the
this is
ground.
in Wyoming, you say?
Well, the missile wing stretched into parts of Nebraska and Colorado, so they no two missiles are less than 5 miles from each other. So when
So
they
you have a long view of a lot of nothing, pretty much, right?
yes, yes.
What's a shift look like?
Well, I kept changing my duty. They wouldn't let me change my location. So I started out with the escort service. And what escort airmen did is they had motion sensors to detect any anomalies, any intruder alerts. So this has all been declassified, so I can talk about it because they're using cameras now. But anyways, they had motion sensors, and uh, so then if there was any issues with that early detection system, they would have to man the site, and so they would send myself and another airman in a camper, to be physically on site, and one of us had to be awake at all times.
What's this camper look like?
It's a pickup truck with a camper on it, nicer than the one I have now.
And what was your rank?
Well, was I was one of the first senior airmen in the Air Force. They added an additional rank, which is E4, or was it E5? So before you could become a sergeant, you had to be a senior airman, and then you become sergeant.
And you were a senior airman.
I was a senior airman.
So you get up and basically look for danger, which was, probably fairly non-existent.
Yeah, it's fairly non-existent, and then I tried out for a 10-man quick response force. I said, well, that sounds fun. And so we were trained to put a force on any incident. So we would live together, sleep together, work together, 4 days on, 4 days off. And then we, I guess, like a fire department, sort of. And so then we would they would dream up some scenario, and we would load up in the Hueys that were riddled with bullet holes left over from Vietnam. And we would
So these are helicopters.
helicopters.
So what would be a typical, can you remember a scenario that they dreamt up for you?
Oh, so many of them. Yeah, they had like they were holding a officer hostage, right? And he's in a pickup truck, and the terrorist is holding a weapon to his head, right? And so I'm thinking, well, as long as he's out of view of us, I could crawl right up to that truck and pop up and
Mm-hmm.
end the scenario. And so that's what I did. I crawled on my belly all the way up to the truck and got to the side of the truck where he was, popped up and shot him with blanks, of course. And then I got in all kinds of trouble because we're not supposed to take initiative like that. We're supposed to gain approval.
So,
You know,
so it seems to me, and you've talked about this, that you and the military were not really cut out of the same cloth. What was the end of your service? Why did you leave?
well, I started thinking about this. Our doctrine was mutual assured destruction, MAD, right? And so we do not
Think
release
about
our
that. The
weaponry.
acronym is MAD,
Mutual
Mutual
assured,
Assured Destruction.
right?
And if you're a younger person watching this means that we had a lot of nukes, and the Russians, we called them the Soviets, they had a lot of nukes. And if they hit a button, we'd hit a button, and we would assure that both of us would be completely destroyed. And I remember a teacher in class saying, well, the Soviets, we had enough nuclear arms to wipe out the world's population 5 times over. But the Russians had enough to do it 9 times over. But theirs weren't as accurate, so it was probably going to be okay, which is not particularly assuring if you're a kid like in school, right? It is mad. It's truly
Yeah.
mad. Okay, so anyway, keep going.
Well, it's a lot of mental anguish being a 19-year-old being subjected to all of this propaganda. Um, I just got to the place I go, I can't support this mission anymore. And I only had like a month left of my time.
You couldn't stick it out 30 days.
I said, I need to make a stand. Well, and so then I said, I can't support this mission any longer. So they
and your officer is going like, okay, you can't wait 30 days. I'm
right.
going to have to do the paperwork now. Is that what you're saying? And you say, yes, sir. And you go, okay. All right.
I refuse to go to the armory and check out a weapon and go out into the missile wing.
All right. So now you're let go. You're not dishonorably discharged.
No, I was honorably discharged. I was like almost a perfect airman. My record was perfect. I had one traffic citation. Outside of that, everything was perfect. Perfect nines.
Did your officer in command look to the side and say, listen, I know this is kind of crazy, right? I mean, what was it was called mutually assured destruction. I mean, what was the average attitude of people in the Air Force at that time at your base? Were they like, it is what it is?
Well, not very good, because our rate of suicide was higher than other places in the military.
Is that boredom, do you think, or stress, or what?
Well, I think it's a collection. I think a lot of it, when you're out there all alone for hours and you're thinking about launch day more than the average citizen does, we're out there so you don't even have to think about it.
And you have a loaded weapon at your disposal.
Right. And so it is interesting. I went in right as Vietnam. So many of the men that outranked me all saw action in Vietnam. And I remember going home on leave, and I'm in my dress uniform, all full of myself. And I'm approaching this young woman with her young child, and she has the child in her hand, and she sees me, and she moves herself between me and her child. So what's it like to be a minority? I'm white, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was being treated like somebody of another race. And this lady, she has no idea what I'm doing out there, the sacrifice I'm making out there in the missile wing, so she can sleep peacefully in her home with her daughter.
Now, you had some depression you take afterwards, right? Did that come from that, or you kind of dealt with that your whole life, Stephen?
Well, I've dealt with it my whole life, but I was never. And then I got out of the Air Force and got married, and I'm riding that wave of being in love and the honeymoon and all the energy that comes out of that. And then we start having children, and everything's going along pretty smoothly. But then I remember when it all sort of came falling down on me when John Kerry and the DNC reported himself for duty, because I remembered that that's the one thing the veterans I knew, they all hated John Kerry and they hated Jane Fonda
Hmm.
because they supported, you know,
The Viet Cong. Yeah.
the Viet Cong, and Jane Fonda, you know, was photographed sitting on an anti a weapon to shoot down our planes, and they didn't want anything to do with her, you know.
What made you get involved with homeless people? What was that journey? How did tell me that story? Let's pick up that strand of spaghetti and we'll call
Okay.
it the homeless. Okay.
Well, what happened is after 31 years of marriage, my wife decides she's had enough of, you know, my wanderings, changing jobs, changing locations, uprooting the family, and she says, you know, we need to be done. And that just came out of the blue. There was never any discussions or anything. And so I go, well, I need to go and reconcile with God. And it's like the day after Thanksgiving. So we're in Minneapolis. It's cold. And when I need to work through something, I love to go out and be alone in God's creation. So I hooked up the camper. I says, I'm going down to Florida. I hooked up, we had a pop-up camper, and I drove to Florida. And I'm sitting there, and on my wife's request, I was receiving medication and counseling from the military, from the VA. And I said, well, that didn't work, God. You know, these man-made chemicals aren't working. I said, you know my brain chemistry better than I do, or any doctor, or any of these pharmacists. So I'm just going to leave it up to you. You prescribe to me what it is that I need.
This is God you're talking about.
Yeah, I'm having this discussion with God.
Okay.
And so I built a fire, and I throw my meds into the fire and watch them melt into the fire. It was just hardly a moment went by, and this homeless man comes into my camp. And I said, well, God, you prescribed to me what I need. And so then I started sharing my food with this man, and I started sharing a part of my wardrobe with him. And all of a sudden, the endorphins, or whatever they call that chemistry going on in your brain, it lit up. And I could feel this oppression lift off me.
So, if I understand correctly, your wife says we're done. You go on a journey in God's creation. You're saying this prescription does not seem to be working. God, you're in charge of my prescription. You throw the pills in the fire, and a homeless man materializes right away. And then in ministering to that person, you feel better.
Right.
I mean, do you think? I always think about this. Whenever something happens to me, I ask myself, did God make that happen, or was that just a random coincidence? What do you think about that?
I think it was God's prescription, because it goes on. You know, then I'm listening to Dr. Tony Evans. He's a well-known black pastor. And I'm listening to him, and he was talking about divorce and how God hates divorce. And I said, oh, I need to get back up to Minnesota and reconcile with the wife. You know, I need to reconcile with my wife and 3 sons. So I'm driving straight through, and I'm down in the Keys. So
It's a while.
It's a while. And so I'm just taking naps along the way, driving straight through to Minneapolis. And then I was communicating with my sons and wife text messages, and then all of a sudden, when I informed them that I'm coming home, they just cut me off. No more communications at all.
What year was that?
That would have been the very end of 2011, between Thanksgiving and New Year's.
And did you ever see them again?
Well, I only saw them was at the victim's hearing of our middle son who was murdered.
Okay, we'll get to that.
Okay,
That's
so
another
that's
strand of spaghetti. Okay.
But
Okay, so
anyways,
you're
so I've been completely shunned and removed from them.
So how did you get involved with the homeless in Minneapolis then?
Well, so I get up to Minnesota. I says, "Well, man, I'm homeless. I'm not even going to be able to go back to my own home. I'm not welcome." So I call a brother-in-law, and he lets me sleep on the floor of his basement for a couple nights. And I called another brother-in-law who was in a larger suburban church. My life has always been in the suburbs, right? Except for my military life. And so I was hoping, I'd be able to help a empty nester hang on to their house by doing maintenance and chores and get a reduction in rent that way. And that's what I dreamed of, that'll be fine. I get to help an elderly couple and and then I asked him, "Do you know anybody?" And he gave me this. Yeah, call Steve. And so then I call Steve, and he lives in the city on Glenwood Avenue, a few miles from downtown
Minneapolis.
Minneapolis, and those post World War II bungalows with the attic roofs and with the bedroom made up there. Well, he had one of those for me, and he says, "Yeah, I I can take you in," and so then I agreed to see him, and then at the end of the conversation, he says a funny thing. 365 days a year, we have a group of people come into the house at 5 a.m. Well, that's strange. What do you do? And he says, "Well, we make coffee, oatmeal, and grits to bring down to the homeless in Minneapolis." And I go, "Okay, God, out of all the places you could have put me here in the Twin Cities, you put me into this one house that does this ministry." So then I just said, "Well, this is my calling. This is why I'm here."
So talk to me because many people do things that help homeless people, sandwiches, whatever. But you spent time in a homeless shelter being homeless and talk about what that's like.
Well, I think it was about 10 days. It's interesting how fast your mind sort of gets mumbled because the few possessions you have, you cling on to hard. You're living in fear of them being taken from you, and so it's confusing, and so then they let guys out every night for a cigarette. And so I'm a non-smoker, so I stayed on my bunk, and there was a guy in there, and he took a phone off another man's bunk. And I said, "Hey, man, that's not your phone." I called him out on it. I said, "Hey, man, that's not your phone." And so then after that, so he just tossed the phone back on the bed and scurried off. And it's sad, but a lot of things are about race. So this older white guy calls out this young black guy for stealing. All of a sudden, there's like conflict,
Like
and so
prison. Like
yeah,
prison.
and so then they said, well, that was sort of bold for you to do, and I go, well, not really, because I don't need to check in tonight. You know, I'm not going to be back. And so I took that as my orders to go back to the bedroom I was renting, on Glenwood Avenue.
So when people talk about homeless shelters, you are sheltered away from the elements, but it's not a safe place. Is that
No,
right?
it's not. It's not a safe place. There's fights, there's knifings, there's EMT calls all the time because people are overdosing or having some kind of episode. So I would say we had what do they call them? Those crash wagons come in almost daily down to the Salvation Army.
I want to grab another piece of a noodle and now talk about that place that you visited. Was it called Loaves and Fishes? Is that right?
Yeah.
And that's another homeless place, but they seem to do it differently, where it feels safer, more like a community. Talk about that.
Yeah, Alan Graham, he had a vision to help the homeless in Austin, Texas. And he was a successful philanthropist and had made some money, so he had some ability to do things. And he was well connected with philanthropists as well. So they built this tiny home village. And so then people have their own space, not much bigger than this office here, probably about this size, but it's theirs. And it has a locked door and it has a bed and a desk and a place for their clothes. And they can have a pet. So once once that mush is removed from the shelter experience, or even worse, the street experience, um,
The mush. What's
the
that?
well, it's just like the fog of war.
I see.
I would,
Interesting.
I
The
would,
fog of war. Interesting.
yeah.
Okay, keep going. Keep going.
And so then, once they get out of the fog and they feel secure, they don't have to worry about their possessions being stolen. They got their own space. They start figuring out who they really are. And so now we have these people living in this community that are engaged in growing vegetables, raising hens, collecting eggs, doing mechanical work, and then they have open mic night, and so they take turns entertaining one another, and they're just living life. There's one older lady there. She's probably about my age when I was there a couple months ago. And she said for the first time in her life, she's been able to pursue what who she is. And she's an artist. And now she's working on making clay pots and images, and the artwork is amazing. And so they come out of that fog of war into discovering who they are.
770,000 homeless people. Is that right? Is that the number
Y-
in the United
Nobody
States?
knows. That's the 2024 census that HUD did. That's the latest data. I'm thinking we're approaching a million, if we're not over a million.
Okay, so I'm going to write down Arizona, but I'm not going to get to Arizona yet because I want you to take me to the Appalachian Trail because you wanted to experience what it was like to be homeless without being beaten up or something, right? And talk
Yeah.
about that. Talk about that trail experience.
Well, I said, well, I'm listening to the radio, and this man is talking about his book that he wrote about his Appalachian Trail experience and how he lost his wife to cancer and how he found healing on the trail. And I said, well, I could use a little of that healing, you know. And so then I went and looked it up on the internet. Oh, wow, that's no, I'm not doing that. 2,165 miles, and the average hiker takes 6 months, and I'm anything but average. I've been a cubicle worker for like 20 some years, and had the body that says that, you know. So, and so I had, but every time I went to be with the Lord, you know, that would get replayed into my mind. I said, "Okay, Lord, let me look at that," and that's when I looked it up on the internet. I go, "No, no, no," but it just wouldn't go away. Every time I went to pray, every time I went to read God's word, that came back into my mind, and then I realized, well, it's a way for me to experience homelessness without actually being homeless. I'm basically living outdoors with just a pack on my.
What'd you learn from that experience?
Well, what I learned is that I'm a lot tougher than I gave myself
Well,
credit
that's
for.
good. That's good.
You know, and the pain is real, and it's good. You know, so if you
Talk
can't,
about that pain. What do you mean the pain is? Describe that, please.
well, everything hurts. You know, your knees, your ankles, your feet, um, your
Was it worse?
hypothermic.
What is it? Was it worse when you're starting out because you're soft, or is it worse at the end,
It was worse up front.
up front?
Up front, and that's only about 1 out of 5 hikers who set off to hike the entire trail actually complete it, and most of them drop out within the first 10 days.
And some of these guys are young Turks, aren't they?
They are like young college age students. The majority, I would say, the majority of them were like in their 20s.
And then you were old man winter there, right?
Yeah. Well, then there was this other demographic of like older people. Like I kept running into retired postal workers.
Right. Well, right. I guess it's like walking their route. There you go.
Yeah, and they did exceptionally well, you know.
Of course, they delivered mail. That's what their life was, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I enjoyed that, and you meet amazing people with amazing. The first person I met, and he was a Vietnam veteran. He was a lieutenant. He was an officer, and his trail name was Quaker, and he's Quaker by faith. And I go to Quaker, and he has spent tens of thousands of miles hiking. I mean, he was a prolific hiker, and God placed him into my path day one to be my mentor because I didn't have a clue what I was doing. You know, so he sort of showed me what I need to send back to my brother and what I need to buy when we get to the outfitter and get me all squared away with getting my pack weight right and
What'd your
my
pack weigh?
oh, it gets lighter as you go as you go. But when I started out, probably like 35 pounds dry. So depending on like my resupply for food would be like 10 pounds. It's like a pound's worth of food for each day between
So 35
resupply.
pounds of stuff plus food and water.
Water, yeah.
Okay.
So
How much water?
waters.
I mean, is there like drinking fountains along the way? I guess that's a dumb question.
No,
I don't know.
well,
How do you get your
there's
water?
some of the best water I've ever drank, just coming out of the rocks. And so then what I did is I had one of those life straws,
Hmm.
and it would fit into a mouth of a Gatorade bottle. And so then on my straps on my backpack, I strapped a quart on each one. And that way I had a visual. I always knew where I was at with my water. And whenever I came across a water source, I top everything off. And so and there was times when I went several hours without water. And it's amazing how your mind changes what's important. All of a sudden, your focus is on water and the next water supply. Y-
Do you see anybody on this? I mean, is it just like one big line, or are you just kind of alone?
well, you become more alone as you go further north because there's fewer hikers that make it further north. Harper's Ferry is like the halfway point. And they say, well, you need to get to Harper's Ferry by the 4th of July if you hope to get to Katahdin before they close it down for the winter. So up in Maine, the winter weather can set in early October.
It seems like they would start up north and hike south, but that's not the way it works. Huh?
Well, there is hikers who do that. The thing with that is the trail is gentler in the south. I mean, when you get up in the presidentials up there, Mount Washington, I mean, you become a mountain climber. Things get seriously difficult, and without having gained what they call trail legs, if you haven't gained your trail legs, so you have to be a conditioned athlete to start up there and work your way south.
But you were a cubicle worker that got the legs on and you made it, obviously.
Yes, yes. The
I shouldn't
trail
say
will,
obviously. You made it. You made it. It was.
well, I made it. I did get pushed off the trail in the middle of Pennsylvania because of poison plant issues. And so then I had to get transportation all the way up to Katahdin. So now I'm standing on top of Katahdin on the 7th of July with 1,008 miles to get back to where I got off. And they call that a flip flop. And that's what they say you should do if you're not in Harper's Ferry by the 4th of July. You should just go ahead and go up to Katahdin and make your way back to Harper's Ferry.
Oh, so you
But
flip flopped.
but I had to get out of the poison plants.
Sure, sure.
Basically the VA surgeon ordered me off the trail.
But what were we talking about? Poison oak? What were you doing?
Well, my first day on the trail, I ran into this young man in his 30s, and he had this black lab, and his trail name was Disciple. And that's a tradition of long trails it's sort of like the Hood. You have a street name.
What was your name?
Sun driven with an O.
Nice, sun driven.
And so, I would share with people that I'm a father of three sons, and I wanted to send a message to my three sons that their father can take on a serious challenge and see it through.
Hmm.
And then the other side of that, I'm also a child of the Son of God, and I follow his lead. And so it depends on the person what version I would share with them, because
Sure, sure. What were the
people
points?
already.
So back to the plants and the disciple guy. What did he give you some wrong advice? What was that about?
Well, what happened is I ran into him again up in Pennsylvania. He had issues with his dog, so I caught up with him. And I'm in this longer conversation with him, with disciple, and he sees himself as a disciple. And his black lab is running, rubbing up against my pant leg. I didn't think anything of it. I had two previous issues with poison plants, so I'm being very cautious. And so what happened is this dog is in all the weeds all the time. And their fur acts like a sponge, and it's soaking up all these plant oils, which got deposited onto my pant legs. And I shared that with the doctor at the VA. And he said, yeah, that will do it. That explains a lot, he says, because what you got going on is not a simple case of poison ivy.
That darn dog. Well, why didn't Disciple get the?
Well,
sick?
some people are immune to it. I remember this guy. His trail name was Davy Crockett, and he'd grab poison ivy and eat it. And I mean, he's like hardcore Appalachian,
Well, I wonder how he learned that, though. I mean, like, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, I bet I'm allergic. I bet I'm immune to this.
Yeah. So he's eating poison
Okay.
ivy.
Okay. So you made it through. It's a great it's a great story. And then you also take a canoe or a kayak down the Mississippi River, right?
Yes.
All right. How many miles is that?
Well, it's 2,600 miles, roughly. It changes all the time, but 2,600 miles.
And you did, and you went downstream or upstream?
Downstream.
Okay, good.
I'm not that tough.
And did you take a kayak or a canoe?
I took a kayak, and I started out with an inflatable kayak, thinking when I got to New Orleans, I could pack it up and ship it home. Because it was like a class 4 kayak designed for like the Colorado River. And so then I get to Dubuque, Iowa, which is maybe about a third of the journey. And I get to a park and it's closed up because of flooding. And so then I tied my kayak down by the river to some rebar, and I carried everything, including the paddle, up to where I camped above the river. Well, I get up in the morning and the kayak is stolen. Somebody stole it. So I needed to order a ride share. Well, it's a better part of a mile to get to the casino, the first place where a rideshare driver could pick me up. So I'm dragging all my gear and my paddle and everything up to the casino, and I'm like a homeless bum. And so then sitting there at the casino, the rideshare comes and picks me up, and gets me to Walmart, gets me a replacement kayak. And it's interesting because it's a small world, because this is Dubuque, Iowa, where Emmaus Bible School, which is nicknamed Bridal School, because people go there to meet people of the same faith and have a lot in common. And so a lot of people go there, find a partner, a life partner. And that's what my parents did. My dad.
So in the same town where you picked up the new canoe was near where your parents met each other years ago.
Yeah, except
which came first, the Appalachian Mountain or the Mississippi?
The Mississippi. Well, the Appalachian Mountain happened in 2013, and then 2019 I paddled the Mississippi River.
You got any more adventures in you? I mean, like, talking physical stuff. What are you thinking?
Well, right now I'm suffering with diabetes and neuropathy, so hiking, unless there's a miracle, it's sort of out. But I will entertain paddling the Mississippi River again. or some river.
Well, tell me about your son.
Well, Jordan, he was he was gifted, intellectually, but he had personality issues. He joined the Navy, and he
Now, is this
scored
what would we call that? Did he have Asperger's? Is that what he had?
Asperger's. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah, he had Asperger's, and so he played chess at a high level. I
Like you
taught him
taught
how.
him when he was a kid, right?
Yeah, I taught him when he was like 3 years old, and he was beating me by the time he was 5. Yeah,
So either you're as good a chess player as me, or he's an excellent chess player, right? Okay.
yeah, well,
Anyway.
he was an excellent chess player, and so then he was homeschooled, and then he joined the Navy, and they had him take the examinations to see where the Navy could best use him. And he tested in such a way that they decided the Navy could best use him in the nuclear sub program.
Mm.
So he's in tech school in the nuclear sub program, but his social skills just are not there. And he's trying to tell the Navy better ways to do things. And he's of the lowest of ranks. And, yes. And so they discharged him. So I went down and collected him from the it's near Chicago. I can't even remember the name of it. But I went down and got him. We were living in Sheboygan, Wisconsin at the time, so it was like a 2 hour. So, anyways, so then his uncles taught him how to play poker. And so then he studied every poker book ever written. And he learned all about how to read tells and all that stuff, and figuring out the quality of hands that his opposition has. And he generally got it right. And so then he started making money, and then he started losing money, and he went bankrupt, wrecked his car. So I flew down to Las Vegas, picked him up. He went out and bought a 1976 El Camino, put all his stuff in the back of the El Camino, and went back to Minnesota. Well, my mother had just passed, and Grandpa's all alone now in his townhome. And so Grandpa invited him to move in with him. So now he's living with Grandpa. So the whole idea of rebuilding this El Camino sort of went out the window.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it'd be a good father-son project, to rebuild the El Camino. And so then my father lets him use his car. And Jordan, he starts going down to Canterbury Downs and starts, playing poker again. And he's gotten wiser and better. And he gets to a place where he goes back to Las Vegas. And so now he's April 5th, 2023, 9 a.m. Target had just opened its doors. Janelle Hamill runs into the Target store, steals a big kitchen knife in front of cameras, in front of everybody, broad daylight, in front of witnesses. He unwraps the knife, and he spots Jordan. And Jordan is not an athlete. Like his brothers, one older and one younger, were hockey players. They had a toughness. Not Jordan. Jordan was an intellectual, and he was slight of build and not very tall. He was just, And I look at it. I said, this person, this homeless person, like a predator, picked out his prey. and he comes up behind my son and stabs him in the throat. So he comes up behind my son and stabs him in the throat. And he bleeds out right there on the sidewalk.
In Target?
No, about a block away from Target, near Target. And so then, and so then this, and this is a problem because we have these repeat offenders. Janelle got sentenced to manslaughter, and I don't know how they come up with that. It's premeditated, but he planned it out. Anyway, so
he killed
got
your
15,
son and got manslaughter.
So he's serving 15 years to life. So he's been in prison now for 3 years. And when he was in the Clark County jail waiting sentencing, I flew down there and visited Janelle, the person who murdered my son. He was in a whole nother part of the building on a video conference call or video call.
Like a TV screen.
Yeah, like a TV screen. And then then his handlers come and give him some meds, right? So we were having a reasonable conversation. Then they gave him meds, and then he just sort of vegged out. And I started thinking about that. How many people are so heavily drugged that they're not even made to live with what it is they've done? Because
why did you want to visit him?
Well, I needed to regain my own mind. I needed to put this behind me.
And that would be how? How do you? Because other people are dealing with this, not just you.
Well,
I don't know. How would this help you get it behind you?
Well, because you give it over to God. I no longer need to worry about justice being done because God has his way of justice, and it's perfect. You know what I would do? I would end up in prison. So I needed to get out of that mind frame. So I needed to go down and forgive him.
What does that mean? So, I mean, normally when you say I forgive you, the other person has to say, "Hey, I'm really sorry," and then you say forgive. But he never really said that, did he?
He didn't say that. No.
How do you forgive somebody who doesn't seem to be remorseful?
Well, just having the peace, and the truth be told, this vision that's been gifted to me to resolve homelessness throughout the world is daunting. And if Jordan hadn't been sacrificed, I would have given up on this highway heaven vision years ago. And so it has to happen. And see, God is glorified through the weak and the meek and those of us who the world sees as foolish. God uses those who he sees as foolish. So you imagine what will happen when we provide purpose and shelter for the homeless population throughout the world. The rich and the powerful and the oppressors will look foolish. How did this guy, Stephen Jelinek, pull this off? Well, it's not me, it's God.
So let's talk about that now. So this is what drives you. I mean, Stephen's a person who is, you probably recognize that he is not a usual person, but he's not insane. He's a perfectly sane man who's gone through some really difficult times, which has energized him to do what would be called impossible. How do we get people 770 some odd thousand, let's say 1 million? I'll talk about that really quickly down in Arizona where you spent a winter. I mean, there's just, what do they call? Tell me about the flats.
Well, there's the snowbirds, and we have another growing. And I think God wanted to reveal this to me. There's baby boomers that are trying to live on Social Security, which isn't doable. So now they're being evicted because of the increased cost of rent. And so then they climb in their car. They're from up north here somewhere, and they say, well, we can go in the desert for the winter and be warm. So they muster up enough money to get fuel in their gas tank, and they receive enough in Social Security benefits to buy provision. So we have thousands and thousands of what we call nomads living in the desert. And then they go up into the north because right now it's like 100 degrees in the desert. So, and it's called Quartzsite, Arizona, is sort of like the ground zero of the snowbirds wintering and so that's.
So their Social Security is enough for food, but not enough for shelter. So they take a car and they drive it and they just park it out in the desert. And then they buy their water and they buy their food and they just kind of live out there.
Exactly. Exactly. And we see it here, like I was at Faith Temple Church in Sioux Falls here, and the pastor was saying how, when they first started doing the weekly giveaway, food giveaway, there's maybe like 400 boxes. Now it's up to 1,200. So the issue is even growing in places like Sioux Falls. We're relatively removed from the homeless population. You get into the big urban centers, there's somebody flying cardboard on just about every corner.
Did you say flying cardboard? What does that mean?
Well, the signs that
I see.
They're holding up, soliciting. That's the sort of the street lingo for it.
What do you say about that when they're flying cardboard? Now that you know about them, is that something that I should help out? I'm driving by, I see a guy flying cardboard. What do you say to me? You're in the passenger seat. What do you say?
Well, I would say I have some water in the back seat. Grab a bottle of water and make eye contact with them and give them a bottle of water. I never give money but I give water. If for no other reason, to have one less medical team having to go out there and deal with somebody who's dehydrated on the corner. So being a good citizen, a bottle of water doesn't cost you hardly anything. And at least that person's being acknowledged and you're giving him or her a benefit of some kind.
So you have a concept. It's called Highway Heaven. Go.
Well, the Appalachian Trail, they had a shelter every half day's worth of hiking. And you look at the Department of Transportation, they have a 30-minute break in the middle of a driver's shift and then a 10-hour mandated break at the end of their shift.
If you're a truck driver.
You're a truck driver. So the DOT regulations. So and then the other aspect of this is that truck drivers spend 15% of their drive time doing maintenance work and looking for parking. That's what the Truckers Research Council came up with, 15%. So that means the industry is losing 15% of its potential. And so what Highway Heaven does is we're going to have valet drivers. And so
Highway Heaven is like a depot that's kind of on the interstate, right?
well, yeah, it's on off a interchange. And so then if any of your listeners have land like on a interstate exchange where it's designed for trucks to get in and out of, if we can build a Highway Heaven. Well, the rough estimate for a Highway Heaven with all its amenities, we're going to have art studios, we're going to have full service mechanics, truck washes, car washes, sit down gourmet food. And so then a gymnasium that would be like the Planet Fitness we go to, similar to that in equipment. And we're going to have a 1,000-seat dinner theater.
Okay, now how big is this building?
Well,
it's getting big.
I had training in computer-aided design, so I'm like, God's putting all this imagery in my mind, and I'm just putting it onto paper. I'm putting it into the CAD, and I started out with saying, well, the street level needs, about the size of an Aldi's, for our retail space. So I stepped off of Aldi's and it come out to like 150 foot. And I go, okay, 150 foot. And so then what do you need? Well, we need a fitness center, okay? And then we need a laundromat. And then we need a retail space. And then we need...
Sounds like you need a lot of money.
A dinner theater. Yeah, a lot of money. Rough guess is around $200 million. And
for one.
For one. But what the beauty of it, Jeff, is the return on investment on this is phenomenal. It's just unbelievable when I put the numbers into business plan.
So what you're trying to do is you're trying to solve a number of issues. We have truck drivers that are being, it's a kind of an unsavory lifestyle. Some of these truck stops, they have a lot of prostitution and drugs and, violence. So you want to give them a safe haven to stay for a period of time, and you want to fund it, or you want to staff it with homeless people who are looking for a job and a purpose. And you look at what you saw with loaves and fishes and saw that what people were capable of doing once they had a safe environment.
Exactly. And I'm glad you brought that whole prostitution and drug scene into it, because that's what's happening out there at the travel plazas. And that's what God revealed to me. And I had a job providing security at the Minneapolis airport. And it was all gated because there's airplanes on the other side of the gate, right? And nobody who wasn't DOT registered with us was allowed through those gates. And we can do the same thing. We can fence and gate the whole yard.
Because right now trucks are accessible. They can
it's just it's a Wild West. Yeah, they call them lot lizards. They just go around, knock on doors. And so that's...
I'm learning a lot of language here from you. So the flying cardboard, lot lizards. Yeah. So
and so then our valets, they can do thermal imaging to detect if somebody's in that sleeping berth that's attached to almost every truck. And so then if we discover a stowaway, well, we'll just call the sheriff. We'll just call the sheriff and let the sheriff figure out if that person's legit or not. And we'll call the owner of the rig, because most of the drivers don't own their rigs. And we'll call and let them know that we found this person in your driver's rig. And so then that driver will more than likely get fired. But anyways, so we're going to protect the drivers and people being trafficked, and girls that we find, or young boys, they have a lot. We can bring them into the highway heaven family.
Well, so I would say, and I've talked about this before. I was in an invention contest, and I remember a buddy said to me, he said, "Jeff, inventions are easy. All you have to do is find the problem, and when you find the problem, you're halfway there. You solve it, and now you have an invention."
And
And
the
what
thing,
I like about your story, Stephen, is that much of the things we see in the world today, we drive by and are blind to, right? That guy
right?
who flying the cardboard, we just, whatever. You don't, let's not think about that. We see problems with crime, we see statistics, and we don't really see it. And what I like about you and your journey and your calling is I feel like you talked about biblical characters. Sometimes prophets just exist to waken up people who are too blind to see. I would say that this concept, highway heaven, I mean, there's no way it would happen unless God ordains it to happen.
Yeah, but
And I
it's
and I think that's why I think that's what's interesting about it is that God can do that. But
well. I asked AI. AI, how many Americans are worth over $200 million?
yeah, did
AI
I make
said
did I make the
25.
list?
No, you didn't make the list, but 25,000 to 30,000. So there's 25,000, 30,000. So we only need like 700 of these. So we only need 700 people that have that financial, and the return on investment, they get their money back within 3 years. Like I had a job with Menards. Menards builds a store, and they're hoping to get the capital investment for the store back in five years. So if everything goes according to plan, maybe it's the money isn't as
What I'm hearing you say is this isn't a charity. It's both a charity, but it's also an opportunity. It doesn't have to be just give, give, give. It can be, why not leverage this and make it a business that helps people?
it's not a
Yeah,
charity at all. It's a
yeah,
for-profit business.
yeah.
There's no government involvement. There's no funding from the government, because the government, when they get involved with something, they figure out how to mess it up. So I want private investors. And right now, I own 100% of Highway Heaven. And so if somebody comes to me with an offer and they want a percentage of Highway Heaven, yeah, you, I'm 70 years old. What am I going to do with money?
Yeah, yeah.
So anyways, that's uh,
So, I just have one more thing I want to get to before you ask me your question.
okay.
This is being recorded. Who knows who will see it? Um, what do you love about your sons?
Oh, I tried to be a parent like my father was. And my father he pretty much was loose with the reins. He sort of let us dig our own holes and then figure our way out of it. And my sons are smart, they're athletic. Jared was a ski jumper, and they're both hockey players, and they're both married, and they both are doing well. They both have um, wives and children, and I just want to be a grandpa. I want to meet my grandchildren, and I want to. I just want to be back into their lives, and for whatever reason, they're abstaining from me. Maybe all that, and I apologize for that. I uprooted them, moved them from Minnesota to North Carolina to from back to Minnesota, and then from Minnesota to Wisconsin. And so every time their circle of friends change, and they go through um, this anguish.
Hmm.
So I sort of realize that now. And then their mother, she was brilliant, and then ended up being a vice president at Wells Fargo. And I'm like the primary parent, getting the kids to all their events and appointments and stuff. Not all of them. She did some of that, but I was more available than because I was doing contract work. I was a real estate agent and a home builder, and so I had flexible schedules.
Hmm.
So anyways,
Well, I mean, here's the truth. I mean, sometimes, I don't know. So there's a video. In fact, I'll point to it here. I helped you build your casket. There's a
yes,
casket in the back of your truck, and you got a casket.
yes,
And you have diabetes, and you're in good shape, but you're 70, but you're in good shape, but you have diabetes, and you're a nomadic person. This could happen. You can get hit by a bread truck. It happens. So, and you are at peace with that. Well, I mean, I don't know. Did you want to say, you want to leave a message to your sons? I'll let you do it now if you want to.
well, they can reach out to you, and share their email addresses. I have their email addresses, but whenever I use them, it just gets ignored. So I think it might go into an automatic waste bucket. Anything that
Well,
comes from me.
you see the camera there. You see the camera on your computer.
Yes,
Look at the
yes.
camera and tell them what you want to say.
Well, Jared and Justin, I love you guys, and I care about you, and I want the best life for you. And one day I would hope to be able to financially help my grandchildren get a better education than what I got. And that's I'd love to be introduced to my grandchildren. I don't even know how many grandchildren I have.
Well, Stephen, yeah, thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. Really a lot of stuff there that's really interesting. And you are, I kind of joked about it, but in a way, you are the world's most interesting man.
Well, that's lofty conversation. But the thing of it is God takes a person like me and the homeless population and changes the world. Well, to God be the glory. It's certainly not me, because I don't have any degrees on my wall. I don't have bank accounts.
So I said at the beginning, you could ask one question and only one question. You got one question. You can ask me one question, Stephen. You got to be careful because it's only one question. What's your question?
So, when did you first recognize your calling and accept it as your calling?
I was a disc jockey. Um, I was walking to work. It was a 2 mile walk either way. It was a good way to get my exercise and to save money because you don't make much money when you're a disc jockey. And at the time, you would send out a resume and then you'd send out a tape of your amazing on air talents. And I would send these out by the boatloads. And I wanted to go to these major markets and become super famous. I knew I had the talents. And nobody else knew I had the talents. I had a guy tell me once, I think it's Cincinnati was the town, maybe Cleveland. It was in Ohio. And I sent him a tape and he said, wait a minute. Are you Jeff Gould? I said, yes, I am. Because I just got your tape. Do you have some time? I said, yes, I do. He said, good, because you suck. You're terrible. You'll never make it. At the time, everybody likes to follow success. And at the time, that success was either Rush Limbaugh or Howard Stern. And I was neither of those guys. And so they were not interested. And they hung up, and I was so angry, so bitter. And I was self-aware enough to know that nobody is interested in hiring a bitter person. So on that walk, I said, God, you are now in charge of my career. Now, Stephen, isn't that interesting? I put a fence around it. I said career. But God is so gracious.
Yes.
He meets our limited faith. Well, the next day, the guy who was a sales guy had become sales manager. And he said, Jeff, have you ever considered going into sales? No. I had no desire, no interest. If you're in a business, the salespeople sometimes are the guys who are just looking to manipulate you, right? So they thought they were a selfish and greedy lot. But it was the day after I said that prayer. And so I said, okay, let's go. Let's figure this out. And so, Stephen, I guess it has been a relentless journey of walking into each day, not really knowing exactly what's in that day. I did figure out that the thing I did better than anything else was tell stories, which is, how do you make money doing that? But it is what I was made to do. And I have come to believe that if God made you to a purpose, he will absolutely take care of you. And so my story is it's very satisfying work. Many people who are my age, I feel like they're kind of twiddling their thumbs or bored or feel like maybe they missed their shot. And I don't feel any of that. I feel like good things are going to come. I feel like my life is on an upward trajectory. I can't really measure it, but I sense that that's there. And I bring that all the way back to that moment when I was walking to work and said, God, you are now in charge. And so that's the answer to your question. And Stephen, your journey is an amazing one. I don't know quite how it will turn out, but I do believe that the seeds that you plant and the stories that you tell will eventually get to the right person. And the dream that is not yours, but the dream that God has given you will bear fruit. And for that, I am extremely grateful.
You've been a good friend.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. God bless.
Yes.